Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're glad you're in class with us today. Dr. Joel Wallach is with us. Mackenzie is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And let me give you the call-in line. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Welcome, Dr. Joel Wallach.
Well, thank you so much, Vincent. Always appreciate your hospitality and your listeners. They are the greatest.
Well, you're welcome, and you're right. They are fabulous. You know, Dr. Wallach, what is really neat about our extended family, if you will, our broadcast family, people will call in and they're bright, they're intelligent, and then what happens is I'm so impressed that I ask for their phone number on the air for them to provide it off the air so I can call them up after the broadcast ends, and then I think 100% of the time I invite them to be instructors. That's how bright they are. Seriously. And so you're right on the money. So thank you. Thank you for the compliment to those who that are in class. You know, I had a question for you. It's kind of, and if this is personal, please feel free to say I'm not going to tell you. But you know, I'm kind of, you know, you've been here to the farm. I'm very concerned about. Well, you're away from home a lot. Your home is in California. You're away from home a lot. You're in the air in one of those aluminum tubes. And, you know, I've been in those aluminum tubes, and the wheels or the brake lines have caught on fire. I mean, lots of things can happen. Well, in addition to that, and that would be the minor things, but the things that I'm concerned about for you the most right now relate to, well, like the hurricanes in Texas and in Florida and in Puerto Rico and in the wildfires in California and the previous ones in Idaho. If you ever get trapped and you can get to us or we can get to you, I want to make sure that you understand that you are certainly welcome to come here, and we'll do whatever we can to get you, okay? If you're ever trapped in a situation. No, I mean that. Kind.
In fact, I'm in Florida. I'm in Florida right now. Mm-hmm. In West Palm Beach, kind of a 4-hour drive from Jacksonville. And, you know, there's still some recovery going on here from Hurricane Myrna, I guess. And, you know, a lot of trees blown over and that kind of stuff. But the airport is actually slowed down. I actually had to land in West Palm Beach and then drive up to Fort Lauderdale because the airport is not working at 100% yet up here. And so there are inconveniences and things, but the people are interested, especially after a disaster like these things. As you point out, people say, we are so glad we were associated with Longevity and you. We had, you know, we have a 90-day supply of our 90 essential nutrients. We've got our, in case we get an infection or a wound, we've got our colloidal silver, we've got our killer biotic and our Pure Works and this kind of stuff. And we have our aromatherapy oils and our herbal tinctures, and so we are prepared. We don't need a pharmacy. We don't need a doctor. We have everything we need. We got the reference book, Let's Play Doctors, so we can do everything we need to do. And they feel very self-sufficient because they have the tools, they have the information and the books. And so your people, our people, are very prepared, and I think that's what makes them so comfortable and so bright, is they are prepared. That's why they are preppers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, you mentioned colloidal silver, and I have made it a point whenever I see a medical doctor or a medical nurse here in the Springfield village, I'll say, well, what do you think about colloidal silver? And you know what I hear? It seems like they all went to the same seminar. And they say, well, you know about the blue man, right? I go, yeah, I know about the blue man. And they go, well, you got to be really careful. And so it's almost like, I won't say a threat, but it's fear. It's helping a person become fearful of colloidal silver because of the blue man. And then one of the nurses said to me, well, we have our own blue man here in Springfield. And I said, was he a chemist or is he a chemist? And she said, well, as a matter of fact, yes. And I said, well, okay, so is the blue man. And the blue man decided that he was going to make colloidal silver, and he was going to use an electrolyte, a saline electrolyte, and that's what caused it. Well, and so I learned that the blue man in Springfield, Missouri, did the same thing. Now, the rest of us who use colloidal silver purchase it, and I don't know anybody else who's blue who purchased colloidal silver. Does that jive with your thinking?
Yes, it's very rare, and you have to really overconsume it. You know, this guy's taking an ounce 3 times a day, and you're going to get blue if you do that. It's certainly not a killer. It's kind of interesting that it's one of the earliest antibiotics, if you will. It was used for disinfecting wounds, and when people would get the plague and so forth, that they could actually inhale colloidal silver, if they could drink it and gargle with it and so forth. They were the ones who survived. It was, you know, they knew that it killed things. They didn't know all the details of how it worked and this, that, and the other, but certainly colloidal silver historically has been on the front line of infectious diseases, plagues, and epidemics and so forth. And this individual, everything from colds to sore, scratchy throats and infected wounds in your hands and feet and body, any place. It's a good thing to have in the house. You don't have to go to a doctor and stand in line. You don't have to go to a pharmacy during a disaster, civil unrest, or some natural disaster where the pharmacies have been destroyed and the marauders have already been there stealing everything. So you have to have this stuff, and it has a 72 million year shelf life, so it's not like you have to worry about going out of date like some antibiotics.
Yeah. You mentioned pharmacy, and that triggered one of my discussion topics for you today, and that is I was reading yesterday about Congress, and the Congress persons have a pharmacist that they've trusted for years. Well, somehow it leaked out that Congress is consuming a large amount of Alzheimer's medications. So my questions are simple. Alzheimer's medications, do they actually do anything to improve the condition of Alzheimer's? Do they just keep it at bay? Do they work at all? Or better yet, what is an alternative to what Congress is doing?
Okay, well, answer the first part of your questions. When people have Alzheimer's disease, taking the Alzheimer's drugs, the goal is to minimize memory loss, and it's not very successful. It may slow it down a little bit, but it keeps marching on. Alzheimer's disease, true Alzheimer's disease, there's 5 major dimensions. Vascular dementia, where you get plaque in the arteries of the brain, caused by the same inflammation that causes plaque in the arteries, in the coronary arteries, in your heart, and in your kidneys and your legs and so forth. There's Alzheimer's disease, which is a simple nutritional deficiency, which we'll come back to, easily prevented, easily reversed. And then there's Korsakoff syndrome, which looks exactly like Alzheimer's disease clinically. It's actually reversible in a couple of weeks. It's because it's a simple vitamin deficiency. And we've known about it for 300 years. It was discovered by a Japanese naval surgeon 300 years ago called Korsakoff syndrome. Then there's Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, where they have the same nutritional deficiency, but they also have MS, multiple sclerosis, mixed in with it. Easy to prevent, easy to reverse. And then vitamin B12 deficiency dementia, which is also self-explanatory and easy to prevent, easy to reverse. So I always treat nutritionally for all 5. That way I'm always successful. There's no rule that says you can't have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or all 5 of those diseases at the same time. So I always treat nutritionally for all 5, and that's why we have such a high success rate. Now, Alzheimer's disease, going back to that, is a physician-caused disease. It actually is a very famous story. It was a two full-page story in the Wall Street Journal about 3 years ago now. And 2 years ago, it was a cover story, a 5-page cover story on Time magazine, because it was so outrageous that, people couldn't believe it. So these stories were quite true, and they did their homework. And basically what happened was in 1901, going all the way back to 1901, the German Navy went to a German chemist at Berlin University in Germany, Wilhelm Norm, and said, look, we need a synthetic smokeless diesel engine lubricant for German submarines. By 1904, he'd accomplished that, and after the First World War, they didn't need it anymore, so it allowed Professor Norman, to sell his patent, which he sold to a British soap manufacturer. They couldn't sell it because everybody's making their own soap in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so they sold it to Procter & Gamble, and they couldn't sell it because everybody's making their soap. So they decided to turn it into a cooking shortening called Crisco. So Crisco originated and still has the same formula as a synthetic smokeless diesel engine lubricant for German submarines. That's what Crisco is, and the solid form of Crisco. And they couldn't sell it because Grandma loved her lard, butter, cream, and eggs. So a guy by the name of, let's see here, it'll come to me in a second here. He was a professor of medicine at the University of Minnesota, Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys was his name, Ansel Keys. And he goes to an advertising firm and says, how do we sell this stuff? It never goes bad, never goes rancid. It's perfect for frying stuff. It's just a great cooking shortening, but we can't sell it because Grandma loves her lard, butter, cream, and eggs for her cooking shortenings. We said, well, you have to demonize what she's doing and tell her that she's killing her relatives and friends and grandkids and brothers and sisters and moms and dads and so forth. And then the escape to heaven is Crisco. And he came up with the Mediterranean diet, which is one of the biggest frauds ever perpetrated against humanity, and demonized cholesterol and saturated fat were the two common threads between all the lard, butter, cream, and eggs. And they got a little bit of traction. And they were able to begin to sell Crisco, and the rate of coronary artery disease skyrocketed when they went to Crisco. And, of course, when everybody was put on a cholesterol-deficient diet so they could sell Crisco, they began to get cholesterol deficiency diseases, which we can get to after the message.
Absolutely brilliant description of this. We'll be right back. Class, Dr. Joel Wallach is with us. He's the founder of Longevity. And Jim's on the line. We'll be right with you in just a moment, Jim. Dr. Wallach is telling us about Crisco. Please continue, Dr. Wallach.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. And about that time, the 1940s, food companies began saying, hey, all the doctors and pharmaceutical companies are demonizing cholesterol, so they came up with egg beaters and margarine instead of butter and non-dairy coffee creamers and all these cholesterol substitute foods. And, of course, the pharmaceutical companies were just enraged because here's all these food companies making money on their research, on the pharmaceutical companies' research. And so they really cranked down on restricted cholesterol diets, and people began to get cholesterol deficiency diseases. And we're talking about low testosterone, low T, ED, erectile dysfunction, menopause at age 35. And, of course, women were getting osteoporosis early, and doctors were blaming it on the deficiency of estrogen. And so they came up with Premarin, which is filtered horse urine. I thought it was kind of cute, filtered horse urine they're injecting into these women. And they're making billions of dollars with testosterone patches, Viagra, Cialis, and also this Premarin, which is made from the filtered horse urine. Well, again, the pharmaceutical company said, we can't have them doing that. So they came out with statin drugs to actually really proactively reduce blood cholesterol. And then they produced another disease nobody ever heard of, even by another name, 45 years ago or so. We're talking about Alzheimer's disease. There was vascular dementia, there was Korsakoff syndrome, but there was no stories, there was no history of what we call Alzheimer's disease. And Alzheimer's disease is a going away of the white matter of the brain. All vertebrates, whether you're a flamingo or a turtle or a fish or a human being or a porpoise or an elephant or a rat or a pig, all vertebrates, 75% of the brain weight is the white matter, the myelin, the insulation material in the brain. This insulation material in the brain, Vincent, is something like 100% cholesterol. Makes up 75% of the brain weight, and it's 100% cholesterol. And so they began to get this Alzheimer's disease. And, of course, then the doctors began to buy up all the nursing homes and everything, put their patients in the nursing homes, and they're making them Alzheimer's patients by putting them on statin drugs. A couple of years ago, the FDA came out and sent an email to every doctor in America: do not write prescriptions for statin drugs anymore. Do not tell people to get on a cholesterol-restricted diet, because you increase the risk of Alzheimer's disease by 100%. You increase the risk of type 2 diabetes by 52%. And, of course, doctors don't listen because they're making too much money by getting their patients on these statin drugs, and then, of course, reaping the benefits by getting to treat the patient for Alzheimer's disease and getting them in the nursing homes. And this is all to sell Crisco. And this Ansel Keys actually accelerated things. Back in 1952, he actually gave Procter & Gamble, he was on the board of Procter & Gamble, and he was on the board of the American Heart Association. He brokered a deal by which Procter & Gamble gave the American Heart Association $1.7 million to endorse Crisco as a healthier way to eat when he had invented the Mediterranean diet. There was no research, no studies, no experiments, and the American Heart Association took the $1.7 million and endorsed Crisco as a healthier way to eat without any science, just to get the $1.7 million, which is a lot of money back then. And so that's the story of Alzheimer's disease. That's the story of Crisco. And so I like people to eat 6 to 8 eggs a day per 100 pounds of body weight. Take the 90 essential nutrients, 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 minerals, 3 fatty acids. Stay away from all the bad foods so you can increase your absorption efficiency. No gluten, wheat, butter, and oats. Absolutely no fried foods, processed meats, oils, no olive oil, coconut oil, margarines, mayonnaise, cooking oils. People say, well, everybody says these are good. Well, that's because of the Mediterranean diet concept, which is a fraud, total fraud, to sell Crisco. America has been one of the victims, one of the biggest medical frauds ever over this cholesterol thing, and somebody should go to jail, Vincent.
Mm-hmm. One of our family members spent a couple days in the hospital years ago. And when I was there, I was outraged at a couple things. One was the cranberry juice in a milk carton, those little, like, elementary school milk carton size containers, and it was full of colors. Okay, and when we poured out the cranberry juice, the carton was stained red. Impossible, right? Unless it's food coloring. So that outraged me, and I kept that in the studio. I think I still have it in here, and I kept a little tub of something called Promise. And I left it in the studio, and all of a sudden, after about a year or so, the label peeled off this little tiny tub the size of a quarter. And I'd look at it, every couple of weeks, and it was still good. Well, good, but it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And one day, I'll tell you what happened when we came back. When we come back, and then Jim, you're on. We'll be right back. Dr. Joel Wallach's with us. Dr. Joel Wallach's with us, and he was talking about Crisco. And I just have an exclamation point I'd like to add. So, this little tub of Promise, I don't even know what you call it. It's a spread. People put it on toast.
It's kind of a margarine. There's a butter substitute.
Yeah. So I had this in the studio unopened, and after maybe 6 months, the top peeled open all by itself. I mean, I didn't peel it open look in there. It just kind of lost its adhesion, and this peel top, whatever you call it, just lifted itself off the plastic tub. And I'd look at it every once in a while, and I noticed a couple things over a 2-year period. One, no bugs were interested in it, okay? No bacteria was interested in it. But yet it got slightly smaller. And then once it got to this smaller size, it stayed that size for about a year. And I was thinking, I really can use this. So one day, after a couple of years, it disappeared. And I said to Mrs. Finelli, did you see that little tub of Promise? She said, yeah, I threw it out. She was cleaning up, the studio for me. I said, I can't believe that. I needed that. And she said, why? I said, well, I need that for the automotive shop. I want to use that on the threads of nuts and bolts and, wheel bolts, because I think it's a fabulous lubricant, and it doesn't volatilize after this state, and it's a perfect lubricant. And is that what you're saying? Because I saw it firsthand.
Yes, of course, it's the same principle as Crisco. And the interesting thing about all this, of course, is when people move towards zero saturated fat, zero cholesterol, and they're getting 2% milk and skim milk and zero fat yogurts and all this kind of stuff, we wound up getting more Parkinson's disease. The people who eat butter, a stick of butter a day, they use a quarter of a stick of butter, a quarter of a stick of butter in their coffee instead of Coffee Mate or non-dairy coffee creamer. People who use whole milk, people who use high-fat cheeses for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like the French, will never get Parkinson's disease. The ones who avoid all that stuff and try to go to zero-fat intake have an extremely high rate of Parkinson's disease. This is a study on 135,000 people, and this just came out a couple of months ago, and it's in my presentation now. And so the medical system, the pharmaceutical industry, has created an enormous disease load on the neurological system because, remember, 75% of our brain weight is the white matter of the brain, and it's 95% by weight cholesterol. And you can't have a reduced cholesterol intake. You can't be taking cholesterol-restricting drugs and cholesterol-lowering drugs because you will wind up getting dementia. You're going to wind up getting low T, erectile dysfunction, menopause at age 35. You get adrenal exhaustion, which can be called sleep apnea, and wind up getting a CPAP machine and all these sleep problems. That's why they're having such a great time selling all those pillows on TV. It's like every other ad is a pillow ad because sleep apnea is really not a disease. It's a normal behavior, and the more frequently you stop breathing is due to lack of carbon dioxide in your lungs. Lack of carbon dioxide in your blood will cause a stoppage of breathing. And this is called sleep apnea. It's a very normal thing. We've watched dogs sleep. They have it, and so this is all connected to saturated fat and cholesterol-deficient diets produced by doctors' recommendation, and drugs actually drive things that way. So they wound up with about a dozen new diseases that they get to treat and put you in the nursing homes for. And it's generational because, grandma is worried about cholesterol and saturated fat for her daughters and sons, and then they're worried about it for their daughters and sons, and they're worried about it for their daughters and sons. It's not a genetic thing. It is generational because they're teaching bad habits generation to generation.
Well, I can tell you that we've had many instructors and students here at the farm, and sometimes there are many of them at one time. And sometimes I'll say, yeah, you're certainly welcome to stay here. We have, 5 sofa beds, and, we have sleeping bags, and, about 10 people can, hang out here at one time. And some people will say, yeah, but I need privacy. Really? I mean, okay. We're only talking about a day or two. And finally, they'll say something like, well, I have sleep apnea and I have to wear this mask. Dr. Wallach, a number of people, a very high percentage of people that I know wear these sleep apnea masks. So I'm just here to say I've seen it firsthand. Jim in Missouri, welcome. You're on the air with Dr. Joel Wallach.
Hi, Vance. Thanks for taking my call, and you guys have done a terrific job of answering most of my questions. So
I didn't mean to do that. I didn't know. What is your question?
Well, everything works out for the best if you just be patient, in my philosophy. And my question was, doesn't all of the problems we're talking about, isn't the digestive system the gatekeepers you made for controlling and repairing all of these problems we have? And if so, what steps should a person take with all the prepared products you're saving to safeguard your future? What steps should you take to make sure they work right? And if that digestive system regulates everything else that happens through the rest of your body, could you elaborate a little bit on that? And I might mention that I know you have the hotline that Doc Wallach calls in. That hotline does have an answering system on it in case people didn't know it, that if they can't get through, when it takes their number and name at the end of it, it's recorded on the Google's text stuff, so they can always be gotten back to. So they might be worried about that. I'll listen online.
Yeah, and let me give out that number. Jim, thank you for mentioning that. Class 417-863-7149. Now, we're talking about the protocol and order hotline for longevity products, the same products that I take, the same products that a number of your instructors and classmates take. If you'd like to start your own business, we'll help you with that. If you'd like to consume the same products and and stay as healthy as you can be. 417-863-7149. 417-863-7149. And there is an answering machine should the lines be tied up. Jim, please continue.
That was my question. If that's correct, that the digestive system is the place where everything starts, how do you make sure that you've got everything in there to repair itself so everything else works better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a very good point. And, of course, two old adages that go back centuries. One is which all disease starts in the colon. That's an old adage of herbalists and natural healers. And then also, they would say, you are what you eat. You've all heard that. You are what you eat. The first one is quite true. The second one is not true. You are not what you eat. You are what you absorb. And so caring for your digestive system and your absorption system is extremely important, because you can take all the supplements in the world. You can eat $1,000 meals. You're not going to get much out of it if you're not absorbing it, even if you digest it. Those are two separate processes. You can have perfect digestion and zero absorption, and you're in trouble. And so you have to get rid of all the bad foods that actually inflict harm upon the digestive system. And we're talking about inflammatory foods like fried foods of all kinds. There's no good fried food. They taste good. They're very seductive, but they're bad. And the people who live the longest are third world countries that don't have the ability to fry foods. They don't have access to oils and frying pans and that kind of stuff. They roast most meats or eat it raw, that kind of stuff, or they bake it, or they grill it, and so they don't have the ability to fry things, and so they're staying away from the bad stuff. It causes trans fats, heterocyclamines, and acrylamides, and this causes plaque in the arteries, increases your risk of cancers. Not good for anything. Then, absolutely no processed meats. We're talking about processed meats like deli slices, sandwich meats, sausage, ham, bacon, bologna, salami, pastrami, pepperoni, jerky, corned beef, spam, chorizo, and for the Spanish. These things are inflammatory foods, and they will, again, cause plaque in the arteries and increase your risk of cancer. In fact, eating those processed meats, just one meal a day, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you're going to increase your risk of cancer as same as smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I said that in 1971. In 2015, the World Health Organization came out and repeated my research and said the same thing. Then absolutely no gluten, no wheat, brown, rye, and oats, no gluten. Gluten intolerance causes what we call a contact enteritis. You get naked and roll around out in a poison ivy patch, you're going to get contact dermatitis. You're going to get really all kinds of inflammation, bad sores, and all kinds of bad stuff in your skin if you roll around naked in poison ivy patch. Well, the same thing happens to your intestines when you eat gluten. 98% of all vertebrates, including humans, are tolerant. Eat wheat, brown, rye, and oats. Well, the grain of the day, when that was written, was millet, not wheat, barley, rye, or oats. So they came along 1,000 years later, and that's why we're in trouble. They're not the same as millet or buckwheat or rice and that kind of stuff. So wheat, barley, rye, and oats is out. And then what will happen is I take people who are terminal, big university medical schools say, they only got a couple of weeks to live. They got a genetic this, a genetic that, everything from Alzheimer's disease to asthma to liver cirrhosis. And they failed liver transplants, all that kind of stuff. We get them on a gluten-free diet, get them on the 90 essential nutrients, and 2 to 4 to 6 weeks, the nutrients were able to be absorbed, and their body was able to heal itself. And it's just, it's like miracles. It's like the answer to the prayer list, because you're giving the body what it needs, and you're increasing the absorption rate from 3% to 95% or greater. And absorption is everything when it comes to the digestive system. So you have to protect the digestive system, and you have to protect the absorption system. They're two separate things. You get perfect digestion and lousy absorption. You can have lousy digestion and have perfect absorption. But if you have big chunks of proteins coming down the line and you're absorbing sort of part of them or fragments of them called polypeptides, you're going to wind up with food allergies. And because your body recognizes that protein and it will set up antibodies against that protein, when you digest proteins down to the basic amino acids, you don't get food allergies to it. And, of course, you have to have an acid environment in your stomach. It's wrong to think you need an alkaline environment in your stomach. You actually need an acid environment, 1 being the most acid, 14 being the most alkaline, 7 being neutral. You want to have your stomach environment of 1.2, like battery acid, and you won't have any of those problems.
Dr. Joel Wallach's with us. Let me give you that number one more time, class. 417-863-7149. We just heard an explosion here at the farmhouse. So the whole house shook. So if I have to leave, please continue, Dr. Wallach and Jim. I just have a couple quick comments. You are what you eat. I used to hear that when I was growing up, and I'm so glad that you redefine that or further define that. You are what you absorb. Yeah. Well, my mom is the oldest survivor, actually the only survivor on her side of the family and my dad's side of the family. She's the last one. She's in her mid-90s. And so when I was growing up, we didn't eat candy, nobody smoked, no fried foods, no artificial colors, no deli meats, no bacon, no prepared salad dressings, but supplements, okay? So I got a chance to see what the others did, you know, aunts, uncles, cousins, and so forth, grandparents. My mom outlived them all. And she did the things that you're talking about. So what I'm trying to say is I have absolute firsthand experience in what you're saying, and it absolutely works. Firsthand experience.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. And this is done in laboratory animals. You can triple the lifespans of the experimental group to get the 90 essential nutrients compared to the control group, which just eats good quality food. Plants only need 3 elements from the soil to make good seeds for the next generation. Vertebrates, including human beings, require 60. So if you're eating some pretty good-looking vegetables and fruit and nuts and things, you could be 57 short, because nutritional minerals do not occur in uniform blank around the crust of the earth. They occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ripple ice cream, just like there's a gold mine over here, and 200 miles away there's another gold mine over there. These things are not uniform. And so some people, they live a little bit longer in their villages because they have a high level of minerals in the soil. They're doing something very primitive. They're taking the wood ashes from their stove and putting in their gardens. And it turns out, Vincent, that wood ashes are not ashes. They're 95 to 98% minerals that the tree has sucked up out of the ground. The plants suck them up. And hundreds of years ago, and primitive cultures today, which are the longest of peoples, by the way, the primitive cultures, they're still putting wood ashes in their garden, which are really these minerals. The plants suck up the minerals. They eat the plants that have sucked up the minerals. They get their minerals in that fashion. And we went to electricity. There's no wood ashes left over in the house every morning. And nobody knew they were getting their minerals from the wood ashes. So when they went to electricity, nobody began to supplement to make up the difference. And that's why we're in trouble.
Now, you met my mom. Didn't she seem healthy to you?
Yes, I did. Lovely lady.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. Jim, any further questions?
Yeah, in this day and age, everybody seems to think that the stomach acid and the antacids is the answer, but I feel that it's given a problem. The doc can elaborate on how to straighten that out and correct that problem. People taking too many antacids.
Sure. Well, you're exactly right. And I know we only have a few moments here, so I'll make it short. You have to have your stomach environment down to 1.2 pH, which is extremely acid. It makes the stomach sterile, so yeast and bacteria won't grow in your stomach, and you won't get reflux. There is no such thing as acid reflux. There really is lactic acid reflux. You get up to about 3 or 4 or 5, you're moving towards a neutral of 7. Bugs grow in your stomach, you're going to get reflux. You want it way down there, 1.2, so it's sterile, nothing grows there. Also, pepsin, the enzyme in your stomach, that digests protein down to amino acids, only works in the environment, 1.2. The intrinsic factor, which combines with vitamin B12, requires a 1.2 pH environment to work. So you can eat 5 pounds of vitamin B12 if your pH is 3, 4, 5, or 7, or 8, or anything like that, because you're drinking alkaline water and so on. You're going to not be able to absorb B12 and wind up with a pernicious anemia, which is caused by B12 deficiency. You can also get, again, a type of dementia. And so how do you get, enough stomach acid? Well, the raw materials for your key cells in your stomach to make stomach acid is sodium chloride, salt. And, of course, the good Lord said, go forth and be a salt to the earth and godless river. Doctors say don't use salt, and their average lifespan, according to their own survey, which is published in a half a dozen different medical journals, is 56. Well, I'm going with the good Lord on the salt, and all evidence shows that you need salt, that both the sodium and the chloride are, in fact, essential nutrients.
Dr. Wallach, thank you so much for being with us and dispensing such great advice. Jim, thank you for joining us and asking such great questions. I think this was a broadcast that should be shared with friends and family far and wide. Class, please consider doing that. me give you out that number one more time for the hotline for and the protocol. 417-863-7149. 417-863-7149. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. I was hoping to chat with our engineer during the top of the hour broadcast commercials and news. Do we have Parker Stevens with us? Yeah. He was going to call in. He was. Let me tell you about Parker Stevens. Now, I got a call this week at home, and this gentleman said, "What time's your meetup in Springfield?" And I said, "Oh, geez, we haven't had meetups for a while. We've had them every Friday for years, and then we had them, on Mondays." And then I had to explain to him that, I reluctantly did it, but I said, geez, I feel really terrible that, you're coming from way out of state and you want to come to a meetup, and it should be wonderful to meet you in Springfield, Missouri, but we haven't had them. And then I told him a story about how Dr. Norman Shealy wanted to demonstrate medical healing remotely. So he brought his equipment in, his electronic equipment, to measure, heart rates and things like that. And so he did this, and he proved that it worked. He got volunteers from our class, from the meetup class, and he demonstrated this from a person who was healing, lowering blood pressure and things like that in another room. And so as a result of that, the class saw it. And then Dr. Shealy does not like to drive, in the dark. So he, left maybe 7 o'clock that evening after his demonstration and seminar. And the group decided that they didn't like that. Then they took a vote to ban Dr. Shealy from the USA Prepares meetup. And I was like outraged. Like, who do these students think they are? Banning senior, we'll call Dr. Shealy certainly a senior instructor, but senior counsel here at USA Prepares. So they banned him. Well, my outrage was certainly not unanswered, and so the group decided to ban me too. So so I was banned from my own meetup by the people who we were helping, and in that, it goes to show you that no good deed goes unpunished. And I decided that, what was I thinking? What was I thinking trying to help people? I didn't charge people to come to the meetups. I volunteered my time. It cost me money to go there. And I was given a free dinner, for bringing all of my meetup group to the restaurant. They gave me a free dinner, but I wouldn't accept it. So what I did was I had a raffle. And we passed out raffle tickets, which I bought, and I gave away my free dinner, which they never even really knew that it was my free dinner. But I gave away my free dinner every meetup to one of them. And how could this possibly happen? How is it possible that our meetup group would determine that free medical advice 4 times a year from Dr. Norman Shealy, free diagnoses of their aches and pains, deserved throwing Dr. Norman Shealy overboard? How is that possible? Dr. Shealy's been with us for as long as I've been broadcasting, 6 years. That's what they did. And they threw me overboard too. And I just can't believe it. Now, these are the same people. It sounds like I'm just kind of whining. I'm not whining. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to explain what people are really like. I'm trying to explain that if you think there are going to be people who are out there for you in your time of need, and before your time of need, they say, yeah, we're with you. We're with you. We're alongside you. We're behind you. I think the expression might be, we're behind you 110% or 200%. I mean, how's that possible? But, that's what they claim. Well, I can tell you that I very rarely see it. I'm straining my brain, trying to think of one instance where I've seen it. Well, So the story goes on. Of course, Dr. Shealy and I are banned from our own meetups, and we decided that, we're not doing them anymore. Well, during one of the meetups, there was a man who needed some help. And let me tell you the beginning of the story first. So for, 5 years or so, I would say to the meetup group, I'm glad you're all here. Now, it seems like we're all in this together, right? Right. Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, what if one of us were in need? Would the rest of us come to that person's rescue? Oh, yeah. Sure, absolutely. Yep. Well, one night, after me saying that, roughly every 3 months, just to get a handle that, we're still in this together. Some lived on farms, some lived in town, some lived in apartments, some shared living arrangements with other people, different walks of life, all very bright people, no question about it. All researchers, keyboard warriors, people who would read the news and report the news, and I would give everyone an opportunity at every meetup to share whatever they thought we needed to know about. So everybody had a chance at the microphone if he or she wanted it. It was kind of a no rules meetup. And I would have a seminar prepared every single time, and we would have instructors who would make presentations at these seminars every week. You've heard the names. Larry Nichols. He was with us many times there. Via Skype. Aaron Dakins. Via Skype. GCN broadcaster. John Regan was there in person. Dr. Shealy was there in person. Dr. Joel Wallach was there in person many times. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, Matt Stein. As a matter of fact, almost every one of your instructors was at one meetup at least. We've had as many as 300 people at a meetup. And most of them were instructors at one time. Like before an expo. What happened was, there was this guy. I liked this guy. Middle-aged guy. Clean cut. Kind of looked like a cowboy. Just kind of like a cowboy. And I said to him one night at the meetup, so where do you live? He pointed out the window. He said, out there. Over there. I was trying to figure out what that meant. Does that mean north? Does that mean... What does that mean? So I said, what do you mean? He said, in my van. I said, is there anything we can do to help you? Now I'm paraphrasing. This was, probably a year and a half ago at least. And he said, it'd be nice to have a home base, place to park, rather than finding different parking lots every night. So he was a former truck driver, retired, gave presentations at the meetups. He wasn't just some guy that would sit down with us and have a cup of coffee and, a salad or a meal. He was an active participant. He would communicate effectively. Very, very bright and articulate. Clean cut. He didn't look homeless. If a member of the meetup group were asked, okay, here's a sheet of paper, write down the homeless person who's in this room, he would not be selected. So he told me that he'd like to have a home base, and what he would do is help maintain wherever it was that he would park his van. He didn't want anything but a parking space. That's all. He didn't want to move in, didn't want to use the laundry, didn't want to use a shower, didn't want a bedroom, just need a place to park. So I mentioned to the group that one of us, has a situation. I didn't say who. And he could use a place to call his base of operations. He wasn't running a business. He just wanted a place to park and sleep. That was the same place night after night after night. Well, of all these people who have been to the meetup year after year after year after year, who affirmed an oath, almost, that they would, come to the rescue of us, should one of us need help, nobody would help him. Now, you might ask, Vinny, why didn't you help him? Well, he wanted to be in Springfield Village. He didn't want to be out in the middle of nowhere. But he said, he'd be, if it were a farm, near Springfield, that would work. I'm an hour away from Springfield. So nobody would help him. What I'm trying to say, class, is you just might be on your own. You just might be on your own. Actually, I would say you are on your own. So keep that in mind. You know, class, you're hearing this live. And, you know, at USA Prepares, there's like no safety net whatsoever. And something happened. I'm not sure what. Parker Stevens was scheduled to be with us today, and we were going to talk about survival kits and what you need in them. And, you know, when you're traveling, I mean, there's so many situations where it's necessary to be prepared. Like, for example, in the trunk of my old 1996 Mercedes diesel, you know, I've got water, I've got food, I've got blankets, I've got sockets and wrenches and breaker bars, jumper cables, oil, you know, pretty much everything I think I might need, including extra serpentine belt and extra idler pulley for the serpentine belt, you know, the water pump and the air conditioning compressor and fan and those kinds of things, alternator. So I've got everything I could think of that might fail. And we were going to talk about those kinds of things. Now, here's who we are here at USA Prepares. During the last break we had, I asked Patrick, our engineer, to call Parker Stevens. I gave him his number, and he made several phone calls and couldn't get through to Parker Stevens. And I hope Parker Stevens is okay. He's a nice guy. And he was going to be on for the very first time today, and I haven't heard from him. So maybe something, you know, serious happened. I hope that's not the case. I hope he's okay. But I don't know. So who's Patrick? Well, Patrick is our engineer. Yep. And Patrick said, I'll be your guest. Now, that's who we are here at USA Prepares. You know, those of us who are serious about preparedness, and we are, my number is 1 in 1,000. So here, Patrick and I have never broadcast together, never worked together other than him being the engineer and talking for a couple minutes, you know, before a broadcast. That's it. And he jumped at the chance to be on the air. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you.
That is, you know, it is so kind.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Cool,
I can hear you just great. So I want to thank you. And class, let me tell you, the broadcast engineers are critical, vital in what we do here. As a matter of fact, Patrick, last night I was talking to the chief engineer, George, at GCN.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy.
Yeah, he is a really cool guy. And I was explaining to him how much I appreciate what you guys do who engineer the daily broadcast with me. And he thought that was kind of nice, that I was thanking him for your service. And I meant it. Well, here's what happened. So I said, George, I know you're really busy. I mean, I know you're really, really busy. How'd you like to come on the air with me one day and talk about how this broadcast network works? You know, somebody calls up. Where do they go? Where do they end up? How does it work? How do I answer the call from my end here, 1,000 miles away? How does that happen? What happens with the signal? How does it get on the internet? How does it get on the listen line? How does all this happen? What about the delay? Is there a delay?
Yeah.
And you know what he said?
Delay. What did he say? Yeah.
Well, I was kind of impressed. He said, yeah, let's do it. Can you imagine? Like, he's one of the most busy guys there, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. And he said he's a night owl. He works, really late at night because he's the guy that makes sure all the commercials get inserted in the right place, the right frequency, the right days. They start at the right time, they end at the right time, all those things, right?
He programs things and, builds all the stuff. And, I don't know if you've seen pictures of the studio, but it's pretty amazing. And it's all, his, big project. It's really impressive. From building if there's something missing between two audio components, making it so they can interact and soldering all the stuff down to Yeah, the thing that's like a playlist that I'm looking at now, that brings us into breaks and stuff. Like, yeah, he built that program. Mm-hmm. Speaking of which,
it just launched it.
Yeah,
yeah, the software launched it. Well, Patrick and I will be right back. Let's talk a little bit about what you do and how it works.
Okay,
Patrick, engineer at GCN.
All right. So this is USA Prepares. I'm Patrick Allen. I'm here with Vincent Finelli on his show, USA Prepares. We were just talking during the break, and that's all I got. Vince just hit a brick wall there. Can't do you
class,
as well as you can.
I said to Patrick during the break, he and I were chatting, on the back channel. I said, and by the way, we've never met each other. And this is the amount of time that Patrick and I are spending with you today, so far, is the most we've ever spent. So this is all off the cuff, and there's no script. And this is radio without a safety net. And so one of the things that I asked Patrick to do during the break, I said, how would you like to take us back from the break? Why don't you do it? I said, okay. So was that a first, Patrick?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me ask you, when first thing in the morning, and let me explain what happens from my perspective. I come into the studio an hour early. The studio is at my farmhouse, and I've got 5 monitors in front of me, multiple keyboards, a mixer with sliders, a couple JBL speakers, a stereo system that lets me play the broadcast during the commercial so I don't have to have the headphones on. I've got a headphone amplifier. It's made by a company called Behringer.
Yep.
It's got four channels. I have 2 of them in case the first one breaks, seriously. And I have a network switch. I have a Gettner device so I can answer the phone. And I've got some power switches and a telephone and a microphone on a boom. That's what I have in front of me. And so I come into the studio an hour early at least, and I set up the computers, get everybody powered up, and I do my finalization of my broadcast notes, the things that I'd like to talk about. If it's Dr. Joel Wallach, for example, as in hour number 1, I will have my questions from the week, and I will have them compiled into a final list, and I will have them ready. Okay? And typically I make sure that the instructors are going to be here, and I did today for our instructor who was Parker Stevens. I made sure he was going to be here, and something happened because I don't leave things to chance. I talked to them. I even called before the broadcast started, well over an hour before he was going to be on, to let him know that today's the day. It's just a reminder. And so something happened, and I'm very concerned about it. But that's what I do. Now, at exactly 9 a.m. Central Time, I'm talking about to the second, I click one of the screens with my mouse to say connect.
Yep.
To GCN. I connect. And that is about within a minute or so of that time, I hear the voice of the engineer. Now, the engineer's doing 2 things simultaneously. One, he's going to say, hey, Vinny, stand by. I've got your instructor on the line. He's setting up. So can you share with us from your perspective, Patrick, at exactly 9 o'clock, what happens from your perspective, or maybe before 9 o'clock?
Well, I finish up my cigarette, and then I come back downstairs. Hopefully a cup of coffee is still warm. And then I don't know. It's, I pull up the screen where I can see your callers and, punch in their information as they call in, and, pull up the media statistics to see the how the signal is coming in, if there's any problems that come up, and then I have you up in the queue so that we can talk like before the show. Then basically watch the clock, and as the bumper rolls in, then just bring you up, and then stop the list that has all of the steps of what's going to happen next, where there's like the commercials or the end bumper or whatever else. And then have the traffic up to about halfway, so that
Tell me when you say traffic, explain to our class what that
what's gonna be happening next, whether it's a bumper or it's a commercial or something like that.
Okay. Now, a bumper, would you explain? Would you say that's our announcer that says,
like the intro?
Now, Vincent Finelli.
Right. And the music that goes along with that. And, like the intros and outros and stuff. Different hosts have their own intro music, theme songs and stuff. Yeah.
Now, why do we use introductions to the time that we're going to broadcast? So, for example, let's say the broadcast, we're going to start 7 minutes after the hour. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's say it's news and commercials at the top of the hour from 00 to 07.
Yeah.
Okay. Why? Why do we have a bumper or an intro?
Well, it serves a few different purposes. It's kind of like if you're playing music and you have things mapped out instead of like on a clock. You have it like 8 bars or 16 bars, and you're playing in a band, and so everybody needs a cue of like we're going to start at this time, this part, and then the next part rolls around, and this is going to signal to everyone to switch to this other part. It's like that, so that everyone can be on the same page. It also serves the purpose with the listener of like, oh, a new thing is happening. That's much different than the top of the hour news or the commercials. It's like this is this specific person with their own content and their own flavor, and so yeah.
Now, so all right, so you're sitting in the studio. You and I happen to be in Studio 3, although I'm remote from Studio 3. You're in Studio 3.
Yep.
What do you have in front of you? What kind of equipment do you have in front of you?
2 computers, really pretty Allen and Heath mixer.
That's top of the line.
Got a lot of channels. It's a GL 2800. You can look that up on Google Images. I really like looking at it. I like coming into work, and I get to play with this all day. And then there's it's broadcast in mono, so I've got 2 speakers. One is coming from the ceiling, the other is just off to my right. The one that's in the ceiling is what's going on the air, and the one that is to my right is the cue. So like I can talk with you and hear you, and that's coming out of the cue speaker, like if it's during a break or something like that. And then, the 2 computers, and then the like call center thing off to my left. We got a telephone and then a second telephone that has like 6 columns of buttons, like one to have someone on hold, one to have someone on the air, and one to drop the call. And then next to that we have the stack of compressors. And an old ISDN machine for, I don't know if I'd be able to explain that too well. That's basically what's in front of me. And then the rest of the studio, I'm still understanding how that all goes together. But, yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it a lot.
Well, and you do a fabulous job. And, it's kind of, this will be embarrassing, class, but I'll say it anyway. Embarrassing for me. So sometimes I'll be connecting at top of the hour, and I'll say, "I'm here," and that's the first thing I say. And that probably now that I know how it works, and I just heard it when you did, so that probably gets heard throughout the Studio 3, Vinny's saying that. And now sometimes our engineer may not be there, may be called away to another studio helping, set up another broadcast or something like that. And then so Vinny does this thing. He says, it happens a lot. When I don't get an immediate response, I'll say something like, "Oh, I guess I'm not supposed to be here today. I'm off today, right? Yeah, that's it. I'm off today." And I'm hoping that somebody goes, no, don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, but that's pretty normal, though, like for a host to, be talking and making their presence known, and for an engineer to not be there right away. So it's nothing to be embarrassed about. I mean, that's kind of funny, like the whole thing of like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to be here today, but no, that's normal. Some hosts are pretty obnoxious about it.
Oh, jeez.
I don't know. Wow. They like attention. Maybe that's why they got into radio. I get it.
Well, there's no reason to be obnoxious or anything but pleasant to the guy who's the other half of the broadcast. I mean,
not everyone gets that. It's fine. We all, respond to that accordingly.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Don't you have a mute button?
Yeah.
For them?
Yeah. Also, it only matters so much because this is just a job. I mean, if a host is going to be obnoxious or rude, I'm still going to do my job.
Yeah.
It's not really.
Well, you're extremely professional. Well, let me ask you this. So a call comes in.
Yes.
I give out the phone number at the beginning of the broadcast. I'll say, there's a call in line. We'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. I'll repeat it. And so the phone rings. What do you do at that point when the phone rings?
Put them on hold, and in your case, let you know that they're there.
Okay. And then do you ask them, so where are you calling from, what's your name, and what's this about?
Yeah, it usually has to do with what information the host wants about their guests. Someone's like how they're listening. All
right. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. So, class, this is really fun for me. Patrick is with us. He's a broadcast engineer at GCN, and we realized that our instructor wasn't going to be here for the broadcast, and Patrick said, I can do it. And so here he is, and we're talking about how it works. So, Patrick, a call comes in, and
what
do
this is more interesting, though. You had said during the break that the moon landing was a hoax.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious.
Okay.
How do you mean?
Well, all right. I taught a class in Virginia in 1993, and my class was selected by the Department of Education to take over the Department of Education's space at the State Fair in Richmond, Virginia. So I had my students, and my students comprised a very interesting class. We manufactured computers in my class, and we sold them, and it was huge. I mean, the classroom was not just a classroom. It was like the size of a gymnasium. It's the largest room in the school. And just to give you a sense of size and scope, we sold $1,200,000 worth of computers out of our classroom the very first year. So it was a big deal. U.S. Congressman came to the class. He heard about it. We didn't say, hey, you think we get a congressman here to see what we're doing? No, he heard about us. We were on the Virginia News Network. We're on the 6 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news. We're on the radio. People were very interested in what we were doing. So we were selected by the Department of Education for the Commonwealth of Virginia to be at the State Fair. And my class was different. I required that all my students wear uniforms and dress, the same, because we were selling $1,000 worth of computers to each customer, computer, printer, software, add it all up, and it was about $1,000. Well, maybe a little less, but not much less. And so I required that they be professional. Part of the training was I'd leave them alone. I'd say, I'll be right back. And I'd be back in a half an hour. Or I'd say, I'll be gone for a half an hour, and I'd be right back. So I kept my students on edge all the time. So part of that training was to prepare them for thinking on their feet and making decisions on their own without me telling them what to do. So one of the things I would do is I'd go down to the end of the hall where there was a NASA exhibit, and there were these poster-sized photographs. And I was in my instructor's uniform for the school, and I would look at these photographs. And one of the employees came up to me, a woman dressed in uniform. She said she was watching me look at them, and I was looking at them intently, staring at each one for a long time. And she kind of thought that was unusual. And she said to me, "They're really something, aren't they?" And I said, "They are. They are. But it's a fake." And she said, "What makes you say that?" Now, this is not a poster. This is a photograph, okay? A very large photograph. Not a lithograph, a photograph. And I said, well, if you look right here, you see the astronaut allegedly on the moon, on the surface of the moon. And if you look right here in the gold reflective foil of his helmet lens, see that spot right there? That's the photographer. He doesn't have a spacesuit on. And I said, let's look at this one. It's true. You can find this on the internet. It's true. You can go to Moon Landing Hoax, and you'll see these images I'm talking about. And I said, okay, so let's go to this next one. And there was the lunar lander.
Yeah.
And the lunar lander, has these pads, these disc-shaped pads. So this lander would allegedly use thrust, compressed gas, to slow the descent of the lunar lander to the moon's surface. And I said, if you see that? See these pads? There's no dust on them. Now, the moon's gravity is 1/6 that of Earth, and there's not much moisture there. So if you were to get some of the moon dust and try to make a snowball kind of thing out of it, you can't, because there's not enough moisture to hold it together. So if these reverse thrust gas jet engines are blasting downward, there'd be dust everywhere. It would be suspended for months. Now, did somebody dust off these pads? Because there's no dust on them. Okay, that's a good point. And then went to the next one. I said, see this astronaut? He's tethered out here. They're doing a flyby, and he's tethered to the spacecraft. And he's in the foreground. The spacecraft is in the background. Who took the picture?
Oh, it was on one of the legs of the lunar module.
Yeah,
that's the story. Anyway.
Yeah, and she said, you're right. It was done at a stage. Years later, by chance, I met the guy who took the photographs in Houston. It's true.
Wow.
That it was, it's a hoax. It's a hoax.